One of the most persistent questions in the Iraqi dinar community has very little to do with exchange rates, banking reforms, or government policy. Instead, it revolves around a simple but intriguing possibility. Does the U.S. Treasury hold Iraqi dinar, and does President Donald Trump personally own dinar as well? These are questions that have circulated for years, resurfacing time and time again whenever discussions about Iraq's economic future begin gaining momentum. But when we step back from the rumors and look strictly at what can actually be verified, the picture becomes much more nuanced. The reality is that there are two very different conversations taking place. One conversation focuses on what is known, documented, and publicly available. The other focuses on what could be true based on logic, historical circumstances, and circumstantial evidence. Understanding the difference between those two categories is essential because too often speculation and confirmation become blended together, creating confusion rather than clarity. Let's start with one of the most frequently cited pieces of information whenever this topic comes up. During his first presidential term, Donald Trump discussed Iraq in the context of financial obligations and the costs associated with American involvement in the country. In those remarks, he referenced the fact that the United States was holding approximately $35 billion belonging to Iraq in an account. He also expressed confidence that Iraq would likely agree to repayment arrangements related to American expenditures and investments. Now, here's where things become more interesting. That statement confirms something important. It confirms that Iraqi funds were being held within the U.S. financial system. What it does not confirm is the exact composition of those assets. Were those holdings entirely denominated in U.S. dollars? Were they reserve assets? Were there other financial instruments involved? Most importantly for dinar investors, did any portion consist of physical Iraqi dinar? The statement itself does not answer those questions. This distinction matters because many discussions jump directly from the United States holds Iraqi funds to the United States holds massive quantities of Iraqi dinar. Those are not necessarily the same thing. Historically, it is well known that Iraq has maintained reserves and financial assets connected to international banking systems, including institutions and accounts linked to the United States. However, the leap from reserve holdings to confirmed ownership of physical Iraqi currency remains unsupported by publicly available evidence. That doesn't mean it is impossible. It simply means it remains unverified. And that is where much of the debate begins. A growing number of people have attempted to use artificial intelligence platforms to settle this question. Some ask AI whether the Iraqi dinar can revalue. Others ask whether the U.S. Treasury owns dinar. Still others seek arguments supporting or opposing various theories surrounding Iraq's financial future. But there is an important consideration that often gets overlooked. Artificial intelligence primarily works from existing information, historical records, published material, and patterns found within available data. As a result, the answers generated by AI frequently depend on the assumptions built into the question itself. If someone asks an AI system whether the Iraqi dinar is likely to experience a major revaluation, the response may naturally lean toward historical precedent. Since there is no direct modern precedent that perfectly mirrors the Iraqi dinar situation, many AI systems may conclude that such an outcome appears unlikely based strictly on historical patterns. That response does not necessarily predict the future. It simply reflects the information available from the past. The broader picture may actually be that AI is not forecasting future events at all. Instead, it is summarizing what history has already demonstrated. At the same time, if someone asks AI to evaluate the most plausible strategic reasons the U.S. Treasury might hold Iraqi dinar, the resulting analysis can look very different. In one such scenario, an AI-generated argument suggested that substantial dinar exposure by the U.S. Treasury could be viewed as strategically logical within a broader geopolitical framework. The reasoning was that decades of American involvement in Iraq, combined with efforts to stabilize and integrate the Iraqi economy into global financial systems, could potentially support the idea of maintaining some level of dinar position or exposure. Now, that argument is interesting. But it remains an argument. It is not proof. And this is where careful analysis becomes essential. The fact that something appears logical does not automatically make it true. Likewise, the absence of public confirmation does not automatically make it false. What we can say is that extensive American involvement in Iraq over the past 2 decades created a financial, political, and economic relationship unlike that of many other countries. Throughout that period, substantial resources were devoted to security, infrastructure, governance, banking modernization, and broader economic stabilization efforts. From a purely strategic perspective, some observers believe it would make sense for certain institutions to maintain exposure to Iraq's future economic growth. However, no publicly available documentation has conclusively demonstrated that the U.S. Treasury owns large quantities of physical Iraqi dinar. At the same time, no publicly available evidence definitively disproves the possibility either. And that leaves us in a position where certainty remains out of reach. There's another detail worth paying attention to because the discussion often extends beyond government institutions and moves toward individual ownership. For years, rumors have circulated claiming that Donald Trump personally owns Iraqi dinar. Some versions of these stories suggest relatively small holdings. Others claim enormous positions involving billions of dinar. The problem is that none of these claims have been supported by verified public disclosures. There are no known records confirming such ownership. There are no official statements confirming such ownership. There are no publicly available financial disclosures identifying Iraqi dinar as part of Trump's holdings. That does not mean he doesn't own any. It simply means there is no verified evidence showing that he does. When viewed from a practical standpoint, many people argue that it would not be surprising if a wealthy investor maintained at least some exposure to various international assets, including foreign currencies. After all, high-net-worth individuals often diversify across numerous investment categories. But plausibility and confirmation are not the same thing. And maintaining that distinction is critical. What happened next adds another layer to the discussion. An anecdotal account emerged from a private conversation involving an individual who claimed to have connections to someone who served in a senior State Department position during the George W. Bush administration. According to that account, awareness of the Iraqi dinar opportunity may have existed among certain individuals connected to government circles during the early years following the Iraq conflict. The source reportedly suggested that some government officials and even certain members of the Secret Service purchased Iraqi dinar during that period. Now it's important to emphasize something here. This information remains entirely unverified. There is no independent documentation confirming these claims. There is no official record supporting these claims. There is no publicly available evidence proving these claims. As a result, they should be treated strictly as anecdotal reports rather than established facts. However, the timing of this claim raises an interesting question. If government officials possessed greater visibility into Iraq's future economic plans, banking reforms, or reconstruction efforts, would some of them have viewed Iraqi dinar as a potentially worthwhile speculative investment? From a theoretical standpoint, some observers believe that possibility cannot be dismissed outright. Individuals working at high levels of government often have deeper exposure to geopolitical developments than the general public. That does not mean they possess secret knowledge about future currency values, but it does mean they may have a broader understanding of long-term economic trends. Again, though, we must separate possibility from proof. There is no confirmed evidence that government officials broadly accumulated Iraqi dinar. There is no confirmed evidence that President Trump accumulated Iraqi dinar. There is no confirmed evidence that the U.S. Treasury accumulated large quantities of physical Iraqi dinar. But there is also no publicly available evidence definitively disproving every one of those possibilities. And that is why these discussions continue to generate interest year after year. The implications become clearer when we focus on the larger lesson rather than the individual claims. Many investors spend enormous amounts of time searching for hidden confirmations, insider ownership stories, or rumored institutional positions. Yet the more productive approach is often to focus on verifiable developments, official actions, economic reforms, banking modernization efforts, and measurable changes within Iraq itself. Whether or not any particular government official owns dinar does not change the actual fundamentals of Iraq's economy. Whether or not the U.S. Treasury holds physical dinar does not alter the reality of Iraq's banking reforms. Whether or not wealthy investors possess dinar does not determine the future trajectory of Iraq's financial system. What ultimately matters are the factors that can be observed and documented. This discussion serves as a useful reminder that skepticism and open-mindedness can coexist. It is possible to acknowledge that something appears plausible while also recognizing that it remains unconfirmed. It is possible to consider alternative scenarios without presenting them as established truth. In many ways, that balanced approach is exactly what this topic requires. At the end of the day, the claims surrounding President Trump's potential dinar ownership and the possibility of U.S. Treasury dinar holdings remain unresolved. There are logical arguments supporting those possibilities. There are historical circumstances that some believe make those scenarios reasonable. Yet there is currently no publicly verifiable evidence that allows anyone to reach a definitive conclusion. For now, these ideas belong in the category of possibility rather than certainty. And that distinction is perhaps the most valuable takeaway from this entire discussion. As always, the smartest approach is to separate confirmed information from interpretation, separate interpretation from speculation, and continue evaluating developments based on evidence rather than assumptions. We'll continue monitoring Iraq's economic landscape, financial reforms, banking initiatives, and the broader factors that may shape the country's future direction. If you found this analysis valuable, be sure to subscribe, leave a like, and share your thoughts in the comments below. I'd be interested to hear where you stand on this topic and whether you believe these claims are likely, unlikely, or simply impossible to verify at this stage. Until next time, stay informed, stay objective, and keep your focus on the facts.